Well, hello and welcome to today's Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. I'm pleased to be joined by Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha Software. Today, Dion will be finishing his presentation from the week before last, and he will be here to take your questions. So now is an excellent time to submit them. Go ahead and type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. One thing you should know, today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Had me scared for a moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My mixing board is acting up today, so I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to do something about it. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter, and I'll let you know when I
Thank you, sir.
Screen.
Excellent.
Okay, and your screen is coming through, so we're ready to go.
Dynamite. Well, we missed you last week, Dave. I hope you had a great trip, and I want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to join today. We always enjoy having you with us, sharing lots of cool information about Alpha, doing demos, and most importantly, which is your role in this, is to put into the GoToWebinar control panel your questions. And Dave will be monitoring that through our presentation and selecting them, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So today, and along those lines, we want to say thank you because today's second part of our demonstration regarding Google Charts and integrating those into your system was actually requested by one of our loyal listeners. And so we want to say thank you very much. By the way, if you feel free to send questions to guides at Alpha Software. We're actually starting to compile a nice little list here, which we're going to be using to provide future webinar content. So thank you so much to everybody who's sending that information in and requesting it. We appreciate it. Do take the time now to add your questions to the hopper, and of course send it to guides@alphasoftware.com. I've got three things I'd like to do today. One is I've got a couple cool announcements and share some neat stuff that's going on. Two, I would like to do or finish up my demonstration of how to integrate Google Charts into a Alpha application, and most importantly how to dynamically link those charts to, say, database information. So I'm going to show you how that does, and then last but not least is open it up for questions. So first and foremost, I want to kind of go over a couple announcements. First, DevCon 2006 is rapidly approaching. Everybody goes, well, September, but I mean we're almost to summer. It's crazy how fast this stuff is going, especially anybody who has kids are realizing they basically have about 4 weeks left and then game over. Their kids are out of school for summer. So what we want you to do is go now to the Alpha DevCon 2016 and register now. We have a lot of great information on there. What you can expect, samples from last year, videos, talks about the speakers that we're going to have available, including an executive panel and some customer case studies, which are very fascinating, which will be great. But also we have been working on and are finalizing right now the training track for Alpha DevCon. And we're very excited. We're going to be adding more content to the website and sending it out to everybody. But the training focus for this year will be mobile optimized forms, one of the key foundational items and elements of the V4 release that was just released out in the world. A lot of content and a lot of capabilities in there, and so what we're going to be doing is focusing on putting together an incredibly effective training course. They'll take you to 0 to 60 in a very short period of time with building mobile optimized forms, and these capabilities are critical for two reasons. One, it's going to put you head and shoulders above other people who are doing this kind of work, because the kind of user experience you can generate with mobile optimized forms is off the charts, both in terms of ease of use but also power, which is an example in our case of the ink control, which we'll talk about more. Also, what you will be able to do is unlock a lot of new capabilities that you may not have had that ability to do before within the new framework. So you're really going to be able to enhance your skill sets, add more value to your applications, your platforms. So it's going to be a phenomenal training course. We've already started developing it. When you get there, this thing is going to be awesome. You're going to walk away with a deep level of knowledge of how to build mobile optimized forms with Alpha, which again is going to pay huge dividends for you. So secondly, I'd like to announce something very exciting is that this is, I'll copy this link in here. But Bob Moore has just released a video, and actually this will be in the pre-release a little later this week, and also some more follow-up documentation and videos about using Pushwoosh notifications. Pushwoosh is a third-party company that provides notification services for both Android and iOS, and actually a lot of different platforms. And we're getting a lot of requests around that, wherein people want to be able to add notification capability. So let's say I have an Alpha app loaded on my phone. I want to be able to say, hey, I want to receive notifications, and then even if the app is not running and I'm giving it the proper permissions, that you're going to be able to see it. And for field service applications, that's huge. Think of it as sort of, let's say you have an application for field technicians and you want to be able to notify a technician when a new work order has come in. Well, you know, if you rely on the fact that you have to have the app open or go to a website to get that notification, not so great. But now with this technology, you will be able to basically allow the system to electronically notify that person, and it shows up as a native notification on the target platform, whether it's iOS or Android. And also, even like on the, if you'll notice on the screen right there, even like an Apple Watch, think of techs out in the field with Apple Watches getting their job notifications coming in. It's very cool stuff. And you know, there's a lot of moving parts to it. So what Bob has, I'm very excited about, he always does such a quality job, as he has created a new template for doing this, along with it an extensive set of documentation, and in process now are videos, and those will be released over the next few days to next week. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and copy this. There is a cool, like, let's call it a trailer for this capability online right now. And if you'd like to check it out, you can go in to do that. I'm going to go ahead and do all entire audiences. By the way, do that after you finish watching me. You know, that's great stuff, but you know, you don't want to miss my stuff coming up now. But do take a chance to watch it. It's going to unlock a really cool capability there. And what is neat about this is that we've been getting a lot of requests on it. Again, it has a fair amount of moving parts to it. This lays everything out, so you're going to be able to literally take this and run with it very quickly. And so for anybody who's been interested in notifications, this is your ticket. And we have had other people successfully deploy off Pushwoosh. It's a very good system, well supported, very reasonable in cost, and I think you're going to find it a very exciting video there. And then the last thing I want to do is to share with you a really exciting notification or notice, and that is that our own Dan Bricklin, the man, the myth, the legend, literally, has released a new app to the App Store, Alpha, or it's to the iOS App Store, or Apple App Store for iOS devices, and it is called Alpha Memo. And basically it is a released product that is available for free. You can go to the App Store, look for Alpha Memo, and what's neat about it is that it uses the powerful new ink control. And so you're literally going to be able to have an app that, you know, an example of an app built with Alpha, released through Apple, where you can take pictures and then annotate on it using the ink concept, which, by the way, we're going to be covering at the DevCon 2016 training, so kind of looping it all together. But for anybody who has iOS, go online, pull it down. You're going to be able to see what you can do with Alpha. It's just a phenomenal app, and I got to tell you that Dan just did a great job about it. It's his passion. He's really been driving the development of the ink control and those capabilities, and it shows you that you can produce high quality, high functionality applications and get those onto the App Store using Alpha, which is very exciting. So we've got DevCon 2006. Go sign up for the training. We'd love to see you there. I can promise you it will be impactful, and you will walk away with the ability to implement mobile optimized forms in your solutions. Check out this video, the coming soon. Also, for anybody who's really hot to trot on this will be in the build, pre-release build coming out later this week in regards to Pushwoosh notifications. And last but not least, go to iOS and check out the brand new Alpha application built by Dan Bricklin called Alpha Memo. And actually, I'll go ahead and do a quick demo of it next week. I'll set up my machine so I can show you the screen running on. For anybody who maybe doesn't have an iOS device, I'd like to show you what is possible with the solution and what has been deployed. So with that, that is kind of my announcement section there. I, again, have put in there. Oh, good. Thank you, Dave McCormick. Thank you very much. First process check. Is everything coming through okay, Dave?
Yes, it sure is.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure I hadn't lost everybody and I was talking to myself, which, by the way, happens a lot. But usually I want it not to happen during a webinar, Yeah. It's like the voices, quiet voices in my head. I'm trying to talk to all these people in this webinar. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and go into the second part of my demonstration about how to integrate Google Charts into. I'm going to do a quick recap, just a couple minutes, but if you go, Dave has kindly put into the chat box the link for last webinar we did, where I did the first part of this demonstration. So if you kind of feel you're coming in halfway, make sure to go back. I kind of explain a lot of the background of how Google Charts work, where to go get data, etc. Very valuable information. I think it's valuable, and I think you'll find that from there. So with that in mind, I'm going to pop down here to my Google Charts section. Bear with me. Where's my slide? Getting so many slides, I got to clean this up. Where is it? There. Sorry. My code library, we've gone over that. There we are. Okay, so Google Charts. We've gotten a lot of requests recently. Remember, Alpha has a built-in charting capability, and it's very easy to use, very powerful, very easy to connect to a database. It takes no coding at all, and you can produce some great stuff. But what we found is a lot of people tend to like a little snazzier Google Chart capability. Google Charts are web first. They're built for the web. It's a free library from Google. They have very pretty charts. They continue to add new ones all the time. It's a very extensive library, and the best part about it is free, and free. And it looks great. You got a wide range, etc. And so people have really been wanting to, and in fact I have experience, and we showed a demonstration last week of a running application with Alpha service that uses on the dashboard these Google Charts. So they're out really nicely, and they're used extensively across Light Up Alpha. And so we've gotten a lot of questions about how to go through integrating it. So last time I explained a little bit about how Google Charts work, what you need to do in your UX, i.e. your form component for people who are new to set it up. I'm going to do a real quick recap of that. And then, let's see, is it there? Yep. And then there's a couple things you need to do on that. Now, what I'm going to focus on this week, and again, please watch the previous week for a recap on the other, or for the details on it. But what I want to show this time is now, okay, so I have the ability to put a Google chart. And in fact, I'm going to go into my development environment, and I have my UX component. And for people who are new to Alpha, that is our form component. On the left, we'll see I have a whole bunch of controls. In the middle, we have our concepts here of a series of buttons with a location where the chart will be, and on the right is obviously our parameters and properties we set. So to show you what it looks like real quick is that, I get that every once in a while, you have a little piece of text here, and if I click this button, this will generate a chart right on the screen. And you'll see it's a full Google chart. It's got the nice hover effects. And as you can see, it's very pretty, and you have a lot of ability to modify it, add, change it, etc. Now, when I clicked on this button here, what happened was that I ran JavaScript only, meaning I generated this chart using a JavaScript function on there. So everything's client side. But I also last week showed how you could use an XBasic callback to basically replicate where you dynamically build that JavaScript on the fly in the back or on the server, and then send it to the UX where it then generates it. So if I click there, you'll notice the chart changed, and you'll notice that what it did is it called back to the server, essentially got this JavaScript, and then sent it back to the web browser where it showed this there. Now what I'm going to focus on now is to talk a little bit more of how I make these numbers dynamic. When I did the demo last week, what was happening was I showed a fixed chart. Basically, I had created, and I'll cover that in a few moments. But what I want to do now is I want to start dynamically building this chart, and then last but not least is show how I can dynamically build the database. I've provided Dave the UX here, control, so you can download it and use it on your own system there. And also a SQL, I use MySQL on the back end for this when I do the database piece, and I'll show you that in a few moments. I've also included a quick SQL script that will allow you to build the table that this is using to generate there. So a couple of quick things I want to go for. First is that the most important things you need to do if you're going to include Google Charts is that first go to the project properties. This is at the Web Projects control panel. Click on project properties, and if you scroll down to, where is it? Let's see where, Google, right here. You'll notice that under the JavaScript libraries, there's something that says include Google JS API library, and I've enabled that. You need to have that enabled because what happens then is the UX will automatically download what's called the JS API library, which is a standard foundational library that Google uses for all of their different pieces. So they've consolidated all their core pieces into that. So that's step number one, is you want to make sure that on your project properties that you've selected JS API. Now the next thing you need to do is for the Google chart or on this UX, you need to go to the Properties button. This is over here. And what you want to do, and you can search for it, you can say Google, you'll notice something called Google Visualization Libraries. And in here, and it's under the JavaScript area, you click on these three buttons right here and make sure that you've selected one of these libraries. Now, I'm using Core Chart because I'm doing a pie chart, so that's part of that library. But if I were doing things like a gauge or a table or a tree map or an org chart, I would have to enable this. And you can enable as many as you want. It's up to you how many you want to do that. But it depends on, and when you go to the documentation, it will tell you which of these libraries. So there's actually two libraries from Google that are being automatically loaded for you by Alpha if you make those selections, the base JS API library and secondly the Core Chart library. And so those are the two pieces that you need that then will support the visualization. If you were just to put this in a standard web page, we'd put in the links there, but Alpha takes care of all that, so you don't have to worry about putting that into your base A5W pages. We'll take care of it for you. Okay, so once you've done those two things, we can now get into the actual working of this. So you'll notice here first I have a static text here, and you'll notice the most important thing is that I have a div. How Google Charts work is that you give it this div ID. So this distinctly identifies this ID. It is going to replace whatever's between the opening and closing tags with the chart diagram. And so that is what's on there, and it's a simple static text you put on there. Now here's the cool thing. Let's say you had 2 or 3 charts you want to put on the same page. You could just put in some other divs, and when you execute the JavaScript, you say, oh, place this chart now in this area or in this area. And this is just HTML, so you can structure it into a table, vertically, horizontal, whatever you do. But the important thing about it is that Google is expecting to have a div, which will be the sort of the container that it's going to put that chart when it runs. So when I click this button right here, it's going to run the JavaScript, and the output of it is it's going to automatically go in and update your web page by putting the chart in there. So now let's go ahead and look at that real quick. Again, this is all recap from last week, but I want to make sure people are up to speed. If I click on this button here that says Show Chart JavaScript, I'll scroll down here to the click event in the JavaScript, and I'll open that up. And you'll notice that it is just running a JavaScript function called Chart1. Nothing too excited. That's all it's doing there. Now I'm going to go over here to the left, and I'm going to click on JavaScript functions. And you'll notice that I have function Chart1. And so what it does is this is the standard JavaScript that is used to generate a Google chart. So you'll see that you're creating your data here, adding some columns and putting some data in there. There's some options you can put in here. And then there's the actual function run here that actually takes that, and notice where it puts it. It's saying take and generate this chart data in a pie chart and put it into that chart div that was on my page. And then once I've done that, I say draw it, and boom, off it goes. So this is standard JavaScript from Google. And if you go to the Google documentation site, they have excellent tutorials to walk you through exactly what each of these pieces work. So now when I go to my working preview, I click this button, it runs that little JavaScript, and you'll notice that the text disappeared, and now my chart is in here. Very straightforward, very easily. So that's how the basic concept works with Google, is that they need these libraries available. This all happens on the web browser on the device. It runs a piece of JavaScript that replaces the contents of that div, D-I-V, that you've given the proper ID with the chart. Now, the next thing I showed, and this was last week, was that what I want to be able to do is that instead of making this all client-side, I want to be able to call back to my server. So I use what's called a server-side action JavaScript. So I go to my second button, where what I'm going to do is actually have the server generate that JavaScript, send it back, and then it will run it. So I click on the click event here, and you'll notice I'm doing something called an AJAX callback. And I'm running a function. This is a XBasic function on the server. Now, to show you kind of what's going on in the background is that on the client there's the button. So when they click the button, it sends a message back to the server and says, hey, this client would like you to run this XBasic function that's running on the server over here. And then that XBasic function is responsible for generating a set of JavaScript that is sent back to the client side, and when it gets back to the client side, it then will run that JavaScript and do whatever the JavaScript you want it to do. So it's a round trip kind of process. Now the cool thing about that is that since I'm on the server now, and I'll show you in a few minutes, I have access to everything on that server. I have access to other web APIs. I have access to the database to gather the data to generate that chart. So let me go back in here. I have shown you the button there. Let's go to the XBasic function that is called on the server. So we click on XBasic functions over here, and you'll notice there's a function here called fixedChart, which is what that button is calling. And all I'm doing is I took that JavaScript function that we had right here, and all I'm doing it is putting that into, this is called a string. It basically, it says whatever's in between here. But all this is that exact function. So it builds the data, options, sets it up, and calls the chart1 to actually generate that piece from here, and off to the races here. So very straightforward. So what happens is that when I call this, it basically builds a function on the fly and calls that same function. What it does is it sends all of this to the web browser, and the web browser just runs this JavaScript as if it were sitting natively on that job. So I can sit there, and when I click on Working Preview, I click on here, it's made a call to the server, it just grabbed that data and sent it back, and you'll notice that I have a little different chart. So if on the server side I change this zucchini to say 10 through some way, right now I'm hard coding that there, go back to my Working Preview and I click this button, you'll notice, hey, check it out, the zucchini is much larger because the JavaScript just runs and it takes that data. So obviously it's kind of kludgy to be sitting here and manually editing that. So now what I'm going to show you is how you can build this text here dynamically. And that's all it really is building this text dynamically, and then that will do it from there. So let's look at our third control. Let's say it's a show a dynamic chart. So I'm going to click on this button here. I'm doing an AJAX callback, but instead of fixed chart, I'm calling the function dynamic chart. So when this clicked, it's going to run back to the server, look for this function, run that function, and whatever comes out of that function gets sent back to the web browser for execution. So I'll go back in here. I'll go back to my XBasic functions. Again, here is my first function, which was called fixed chart. Now I'm just going to scroll down a little bit, and now I have dynamic chart. Okay. So let's look and see what's going on here. You'll notice something, that in here I have pretty much, it kind of looks the same. I've got this function here, but notice in here, instead of that hard-coded data, I have two curly brackets and a variable name called chart data, and then two curly brackets. Because what I'm going to do is in XBasic, I'm going to use an XBasic trick that I basically can take this string and then dynamically substitute what this information should be right here, so that then the output of it. So how it works is that we build a little piece of text, this chart data. I run what's called stringtran, which takes this chart code right here and it replaces this with chart data in there. So this is kind of contrived because I haven't really done anything dynamic other than I've separated my shell of what the function is from the data itself. But I'll show you in a moment how this becomes really, really popular. So what happens is the web browser calls back. The first thing this function does is it builds essentially the shell. It basically puts this text together, but in here is still this little, call it a placeholder. Then what it does is that it puts what I want to put in that placeholder into a variable, and then I run this function called stringtran, which will take that shell and substitute chart data with this variable chart data. And there's a couple different ways to do this. I choose this method. This is just the way I've used it before. There's actually techniques you can use which will use a JSON to substitute that data. There's a number of different ways you can handle this. So you just have to look under string substitution functions for Alpha. But that's all it does. And then once it's done that, it returns that to the front end. So if we go in to the working preview and I click this Show Dynamic Chart Build Chart, again, kind of same thing you're starting to see happening here. Now if I go back into my function and notice that I just changed this data right here. So let's say olives are 8. I save that. I go into working preview and I click on the build chart. You're going to notice olives are much larger because basically it just combined that static text together. So again, still contrived, but now I have the basis to make this very, very interesting, which is show a dynamic chart in my database. So check this out. So let me show you the end result. If I click here, you'll notice that it is this chart. But I'm going to go ahead and go into my MySQL database. I use Navicat. Should have had this open here. And I want to show you how I can change data in the database, and this will automatically change. So I'm going to go into my database here. I'm going to go down to demonstration, and I have a table in here called pizza toppings. And so I've got this table, and again, I've sent this. We'll send this out to you. So let's change mushrooms to 5. So now this is what my data is: mushrooms, onions, olives, zucchini, pepperoni, 5 through 2. So now I go back into my running, and I click this button here. Check what happened. It automatically updated this chart to reflect what's in that database. And here's where it's really, really cool, is that if I go back in here and I say, what's your favorite there? Maybe pineapple?
Anchovies.
Or what do you like? Anchovies, okay. The only thing is that's going to be such a low number because nobody eats that. So yes, I'm just going to put in 1. Okay, but let's just do that. We'll add anchovies just to make everybody, we're just making sure that Dave is happy. So I go back in here and I hit dynamic chart. Check it out. You now see it's added anchovies here, and you notice I didn't touch a line of code. It automatically took that data from that data table and turned it into what I need here, and I'm going to show you how to do that next. And that'll only take about 4 or 5 minutes, and we'll open it up for questions, so we'll have good time for questions. But I'm going to go back in here because Dave, I'm sorry, pineapple, and that's going to be 10 because I really like pineapple on there. It's really good. In fact, I also like barbecue chicken. Is also really popular these days, California Pizza Kitchen. So I'm going to do that. Oh, what happened here? Did I save this here? Let me save that here. Okay. Why that? Oh, we just went there. So much for that. Okay, there you go. I don't know what happened there. It's all in there. But you'll notice it added pineapple. Big topic. Barbecue chicken, pretty good. Anchovies, little small slice, literally and figuratively. So that's all driven from this database. So as I do that, so as you can see, this once you kind of have this in place, you can create completely data-driven dashboards where all this is handled by just doing queries. And right now, I'm using a table, but this could be a very complex view that goes against multiple tables to do some statistical analysis, and then the system just takes the content of this, whether it's a view or there. It could be a stored procedure. It could be anything. It's pretty powerful. But again, the neat thing is once you've set up the chart, there's no more work involved. It will just automatically accept that data and render it for you on that part. So now let me show you the secret sauce for how that works. So I'm going to go here to, and no pun intended, pizza, secret sauce, go where you will. So I go to show dynamic chart. You're starting to see a pattern here. I do an AJAX callback, and now it's called dynamic chart data. So when I click that button, it's calling a function on the server that, and because that's where my database, I'm able to do this. So I click cancel here. I'm going to go to my XBasic function. I'm going to scroll down here to dynamic chart data. This is the function that is called when I click that. So you'll notice a couple things here. It's a little more complex. First, I put in some dimensions, some items using our standard XBasic database interaction. It's called SQL connection arguments there. I've also created some different information here. So for instance, what I did is, before I kind of had one monolithic, but now what I've done is I've set it into a header, then I have a footer, and then what I do, which is really exciting, is I connect to the database, I run a query, and from that comes back this information, ID, topping, and quantity. That's what comes back. Then what I do, and here's where it gets interesting, is I iterate through that. So I make a call to the database. It returns what's called a result set, which is basically that table data in an array inside my memory. And so what I do is I run through a loop where I pick off each element of that array, and I'm dynamically building a string. And you'll notice what this string looks like. Let's go back here. If you look at each of these data elements, it starts with a left-hand square bracket with a single quote. Then there's the data value for this, and then there's another single quote, because this is all text. Then there's a comma. Then there's the actual numeric figure. And then there's a close bracket and a comma. And that's the same thing on every row, except notice something. This last row does not have a comma. Always tricky. Always little things there. So what I need to do is, when I'm creating and going to feed it this chart data values, I need to dynamically build these rows. And so what's going on here is it goes through this here. You'll notice it's opening with the bracket and the single there. It's then putting in the topping name. This is the nomenclature to say, take the first row, and it's the result set, and use the topping column, which is this column right here. Grab that, put a single quote and a comma, take the quantity, put it in there, and then put the point there, and it just does that. So basically it goes through and it builds these it builds these lines up directly there. Now the problem is, when I run it, it's also going to have an in comma, because my template is the same every time through. It's got this comma at the bottom. So we use a little quick trick, which you'll get used to, is there's a command called rtrim that says take the text that was generated and strip off this little comma at the very end. So therefore what it's going to do is it's going to generate all these rows the same. Then what it's going to do is go in here and just delete that, and now I have the data. And then all I do is I combine my header, my data, and my footer, and voila, I send it back to the front end. So it's essentially what you did before, but what we're doing is, instead of having a fixed set of data here, we actually dynamically pull it from the database, run a loop that creates each row, strip out that last comma, and boom, puts it. And as you can see, it works great. So the cool thing about this is that if I added a new pizza topping, I didn't have to change any of this code, because it said, well, just give me all the pizza toppings in here, and it runs through each of those rows, so it continually builds those rows up. And this is the same pattern you will use for all the Google charts. All the Google charts, some are more complex than other, use this kind of formatting here. Now, if there's kind of multiple, like when you get starting into like grouped pie charts, or I'm sorry, bar charts, where you may have like 3 data series on it, it gets a little bit more, but it's the same concept of build essentially what would be called a template for each row, iterate through each element in the database, insert those values in the row, and then combine it with a header and a footer, and then spit it all out and send it to the air. As you can see, it works really nicely. It's all data driven. So let's all of a sudden this week, our friend Dave goes out and buys a bunch of pizzas. So we know anchovies are going to be very big this week. So let's go ahead and do that, and you'll notice, wow, look at this, anchovies are growing here. 7.2% of the people are doing that. So awesome, it's fun, and it's great, and they're great looking, and you can adjust everything about this, the colors, etc., the titles, I just kind of did a simplistic version, but it's the same basis. It's really all you're doing is building up a text string, which just happens to be JavaScript, to send back and do that. And once you got a handle on that, it opens up a world of opportunities, especially with Google Charts, but any kind of system like this from that standpoint. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, and that's the end of the demonstration period here. If I went over anything a little too quick, remember we record these, and this will be available in a couple days on the Alpha website under our video library, which Dave is really focused on putting together and making sure it's up to date with the latest and greatest information. But if you have other questions or something I might have missed or didn't make sense, please ask your questions now. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mr. Anchovy.
Excellent.
All right.
I don't know about Mr. Ant. I don't know why I thought of anchovies. I actually don't like them. They're very salty and nasty, and George Carlin,
you know what? Actually,
like
I'll tell you,
salty shoelaces. Although I think
well, I'll tell you,
depends where you get them from.
Well, actually, I for my honeymoon with my wife, we went to Italy, and I had an anchovy pizza there, and to be honest, it was fabulous because it was like fresh and it was super salty, and they weren't kind of these things that came out of a really ugly can that had been sitting in there for a while. Obviously, ingredients are everything, so even though it gets a bad rep, and actually if you just put a little anchovy on there, it's just very salty. It just adds a saltiness to it. So I'll let that go. But yeah, I like that song, that old Jay Giles song, No Anchovies.
No anchovies, please. Yes, exactly.
No anchovies. Okay.
So a couple questions about the charts today. Let me just, first of all, a couple people asked if they can get the code that you are using. And so what I will do is, if you send me this component, DN, when I post the video to videos.alphasoftware.com, in the description up on Fiddler, when you follow the link, you'll have a download link to this component. So you should be able to get it from there.
That's probably and if anybody is super hot to trot, send it to DN at alphasoftware.com, DION at alphasoftware.com. And if you just need to have it this afternoon, and I'll be glad to send it the file, and also I have a SQL script that will build that table and insert some sample data into it just to make your life easier.
Great.
And it's meant for MySQL, by the way. But great, yeah.
So quick overview question. Someone asks, why is this better than the built-in Alpha chart controls?
Well, it's not, the way I'd say it is not necessarily better. It's different. It's different strokes for different folks. I use the built-in one all the time because there's none of this kind of code building. It's all point and click, and you just have to understand what's called a data series on a UX, and we could actually do a session on the built-in graphing. That may be a really good follow-on webinar, because you need to understand that data series, because once you've done the data series, you can then hook it to the graph and then it updates. So there's a lot of advantages. Also, the Alpha graphs also work inside reports also. So that's kind of a nice benefit that happens there. What I've found, and the comment, is that the Alpha graphs, or charts, excuse me, are good, but they're a little dated in their look and feel. They're a little bit more desktop oriented, kind of late 90s, early 2000s, and that and there's a fixed set of them too. So people sometimes tend to like to have a little more Web 2.0, HTML oriented stuff, and the Google stuff matches it there. And Alpha is already built in support of this, so we're like, hey, you're not going to hurt our feelings if you use Google versus our internal. Whatever works best for you and your clients and your customers, please do. So I'd say, if I were to say the difference is that if I need charting for reporting, I would definitely use the internal ones. To get started, it's actually easier to do that with the internal ones. So if you're just getting started, don't want to spend a lot of time understanding these codes and these techniques, use the internal one there. If you have a demand where someone comes to you and say, I want to have a little nicer charting from a visual standpoint, that's when you will probably step into this area. Plus, there are certain charts that Google has that we do not, things like org charts and everything else that use the same concept. So there may be a requirement along those lines. But really it's developer's choice in terms of which direction you go. They're both equally valid. It's just a matter of what your particular situation is and how you do it. And realize this same technique I'm showing you for there, I've done with AmCharts. Actually, that's another part. Some of these are paid, so it's going to cost you money to buy these and put them in there. But I've done this with AmCharts because it's all the same concept of some JavaScript. And these are really cool. I mean, there's some cool things, like if you want more of a, you can just see that it's got a whole, it's very sexy very cool. You can actually do stuff like this, you know, and you're not going to be able to do that with an alpha internal one. Again, there's a cost for that. And then the other one, which again is also, is that a number of people I've mentored have used the Fusion Charts product. And again, looks really nice, is sexy, is very sharp, has a lot of functionality in it. You know, you can see there's a little bit more there. There's a ton of examples on there. But again, it will cost money, so you have to decide what you want to do. But I'm using the same technique where on the fly I'm basically building the commands to build this chart by merging data. So what I showed you with Google Charts, the same methodology will work with this. It just takes a little research to look at their example and figure out how to dynamically build that text to do it. And I just find it's really a lot of fun, and you know, there's just so many opportunities. There are also a whole number of free libraries. You know, those are AM charts and JavaScript charts from Fusion are paid. Google is free, but there's also like, I don't know, 10 more of them out there, and all of them have their different nice little hooks and feels and look and feels. So, you know, same technique, just a different library you're using to execute to generate the visuals. But once you get into it, once you've done one, the rest is just turn the crank, figure out how it works, and make it work, because you're really just taking a template and modifying it from there. So I hope that gives you a little bit more flavor of internal versus external and kind of the pros and cons and how you'd use for each of those from there.
Someone had brought up another example of an external charting system, also from Google. Google has, it appears to still be in beta from the website, type of charts that are part of its material design effort.
Yes.
Material design, but it's rather nice, sort of flat.
Well, we include the material design icons now, so pretty cool.
So the icons are there, but we don't necessarily have the charting thing built in without, I mean, you can still include the libraries yourself and do it that way. But I don't know if you've added in.
Yeah, it's going to be, you're just going to be, you know, you can manually insert those libraries kind of scenarios. I want to know why this is not showing up yet, but it's definitely beta, so don't look at me. This is Google's site, not mine. So
do check out this site, though, when you get a chance, everyone. It's really quite interesting, the Google material design. I think it's going to...
Yeah, it's kind of a flatter...
Yeah,
they went with a much flatter kind of
very flat, but
setup.
It's a really nice sort of style guide to making modern apps that look like they're 2016. Who knows what it'll be 2 years from now? But this seems to be what it is right now. It's like
it'll be immaterial design. We're going to go to immaterial design is what we're going next. You know, it's ephemeral, so that's great. But yeah, no, and they look really sharp, and they render fast. You know, you can do some really kind of nice little hover over effects, and what I like, actually, what I really enjoy about Google's is that they literally walk you through line by line by line of how their charting works. So this look a little familiar, everybody? I basically copied this and then just started tweaking it from there. So it's basically you just go through and it will walk you through every step of what's happening. Again, we handle some of these things like this stuff, like this loading the core chart. That's what we're taking care of it for you. But if you were to put this on a static HTML page, you could do the same thing by just adding these script things. But it's going to walk you through everything, and you know, just spending maybe an hour on this site will really give you a good feel, and then you can rock and roll. And most of the sites are really good. I found that the AmChart documentation is really good, and even the Fusion Charts is really good. For instance, just to let you know, is on Fusion Charts, I had a client that needed the ability to do some very sophisticated, see if I can go down here and find it for everybody here. Where is it? It's not maps, but it's, bear with me, everybody. So that's Tableau. There, just cost them a couple cents. There you go. There we go. It's a construction company, and they had some very sophisticated requirements for Gantt charts. And so I found and worked with them the ability to create, and it uses the same technique, is that you can create these really cool Gantt charts, you know, with hover over effects and linking and showing progress and everything else there. And this is just very similar to what I did with Google Charts, just much more sophisticated because there's a lot more you have to do. And one of the cool things about that is that it uses JSON for data. And so there's a lot of nice things that you can do with Alpha to create JSON. You can basically put it into a array and then convert that array to JSON. So this was a situation where there wasn't a built-in Alpha capability to do a Gantt chart. There's actually a third-party tool you could also use, but again, they needed very specific things. With this, there was complete customization capability. So we ended up using the same method I showed you today to basically build their Gantt chart, and it works really well. It looks good. It's printable. It's you can download it as an image. They're very pleased with it because it just fit their company. It was just exactly how they view the world, and it was in there. But that's the cool thing about Alpha. You know, when you need to, you're not what's built into Alpha. They give you all the hooks and the tools and the code and technology to bring in these third-party capabilities to make your customers happy, and that's the end. That's in the end the game. So.
Excellent.
Thank you for letting me go off on a tangent there, but I hope people do.
Not at all. So we had a couple of related questions. One person asked, okay, this looks like it's JavaScript based. Can I include this in a PhoneGap app that maybe is to be used offline and still be able to generate charts, or do I have to make some?
Great question. In fact, another client I was mentoring is building that right now. They have a PhoneGap app. It's targeted for iOS. They're using the Alpha, or they're using Google Charts because they like the look and feel. And what they're doing is they're using a new feature in Alpha. If I go to the UX, let me go to the design here. I have the ability now to use what's called client-side data cache. And there's a whole video on here, and it's a video on how this works. But basically what happens is that if you include this on a web app or in a PhoneGap, the system will automatically grab data from like a data source, either a back-end database or web service, and then store that locally. Then what they did is that when they did, like when I first started, I show you how I just had this JavaScript function. Go here. Where is it here? Right here. Well, they just basically use JavaScript to access the client-side cache, and so therefore they could extract all this data, have it on the local machine in PhoneGap, and then when the person actually showed that graph, instead of calling the server, it just used the client-side data cache. And here's the really cool thing about it. The Alpha built-in client-side data cache takes care of updating and refreshing that data whenever you need it to be. So they were able to say, okay, in the morning, every morning, refresh that data and then have that available for the visualization of the charts. So great question, and you always have to be thinking about offline versus connected. You'll notice that my sample here, I am basically calling back to the server, so that requires a connection. So if you're on a desktop web browser, this works great. On a mobile, you have to be connected. But in this case, you can use the combination of Alpha's client-side data cache, and there's a great series by Selwyn that shows you how to use that, combined with some JavaScript on here, and you can get the best of both worlds, and it runs completely disconnected. It shows these beautiful, renders these beautiful graphs in the actual browser on the mobile device, or in the app on the mobile device. Great combination, works great, and the client is rapidly moving forward with their project because they basically created the standard way of doing this, and now they're just copy-paste kind of scenario.
Excellent. We may have run out of charting questions, amazingly enough. Oh. That hasn't happened in weeks, but I'm sure some will come in.
Oh, I know. I'm sure they will.
So to a non-charting question, someone actually quickly asked about the Alpha Memo product in the Apple App Store, and said they were having problems finding it. Other people wrote in and said, if you're looking for that, look for Alpha Memo, all one word. So that's basically fine.
It's all one word.
No spaces in between. You should be able to find it in the App Store. Another question we have here is about the app server. And maybe this isn't the time to address this. We might be able to do it in a future one. But they were asking about how you can get the app server to use more than one CPU. The app server usually comes with a 4 CPU license. How does it take advantage of the other?
Very good question. I know for sure that what you can do is you can set up the 4 app servers, 1 app server per core. So if you have a machine that has 4 cores, what you can do is set up 4 app servers, one for each of those cores, and then be able to offload the sort of the load to each of those different app servers there. I do not believe, and I can double check this to make sure, that Alpha will, spin up the other cores. I think it just consumes one core when it runs, from my understanding there. And that's where you get into the IaaS, because the IaaS uses all the machine bandwidth, and so for things like rendering pages and stuff like that, we kind of say if it's going to be a super high volume site, it may be something you want to look at IaaS because of all the built-in performance capabilities that IaaS brings you.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually was the second part of the question. Is IaaS really the way to have Alpha really take the full advantage of the hardware of the machine?
And the answer is absolutely yes. Yeah, because IaaS will just spin up those cores and distribute things and do whatever it needs to do to keep things running really fast and efficient. But my understanding, and again I'll double check on it, is that to use each core, what you'll do is spin up an app server and assign it to that core, and therefore you'll have those app servers up and running, and then you can distribute the load across your back office people versus your customer base who's hidden from the outside. You can direct it to each one of those app servers, and thus you get a much higher performance on the machine. And Dave, I'm not sure if you have any other insights on that, but that's my understanding.
That's it. The only other thing is that the standard app server will also, when you're running reports, knows how to spin up to other cores and take advantage of that.
Bingo.
So that's one of the things that's built in. So another question. You had mentioned at the beginning the DevCon training. I know I'm excited about this. I know we're all working hard here at Alpha to pull that off. But the question was, is the mobile optimized forms part that you were talking about, is that covered in the 3 days, or is that the pre-conference training thing?
And Dave, that's
that is what
there's going to be sessions and discussions of that, but as far as the training, it's going to be the pre-training or
that will be.
And but during Selwyn will be giving roadmap updates. He'll be talking about different features and capabilities. Dan will. So there's going to be content in there. But if you're looking for hands-on, how do you go from zero to start with no knowledge to being able to build it out fully by the end of the day? That's what we're going to be providing. We're very excited about being able to get a large number of people really comfortable and on board with Mobile Optimized, because we think it'll have a dramatic impact on the user base out in the world, because they'll be creating much better, easier to use interfaces for mobile, either phones or tablets.
Terrific.
It's going to be fun.
So it will be. Anyway, back to the questions here. We have a couple more chart questions that have come in.
Oh, good. But so wait, there's more.
There's always more. If you had, okay, so let's say you had talked earlier about adding JavaScript libraries for charting. And ones that don't come pre-installed. And it was just a general question of, how do you add a JavaScript library, say, to your UX component?
Outstanding. So I'm at the UX component. That's a great question. And this works for any JavaScript library. So what you'll see is there's JavaScript libraries for, say, doing cool controls and stuff like that. These HTML templates that have these little neat controls in it. What you need to do is go into your UX component, go to the Properties tab, and then scroll down until you get to the JavaScript area here. Now, as you noticed before, we already had this pre-made selector that if you clicked on these, it will automatically include those JavaScript libraries. In your case, all you need to do is go into this JavaScript linked files. So this is basically where you tell this UX, when you are sent to either the web browser or the mobile device, I want you to include this. So the libraries piggyback and go down there to the device. So in here you would put in, for example, let's say call it my cool JS script, whatever it happens to be called, .js. Now what's important is if it's in a subfolder, you have to tell it the full realized subfolder. And actually I don't think you put the JS on here. You just put the function name itself or the file name. Oh, I see. It's you do put the JS, because you can actually specify only certain functions that go with it. But anyway, bottom line is that all you do is go onto your properties, go to the JavaScript area, go to JavaScript link files, enter in the full path, the relative path to that JavaScript library, and what will happen is Alpha will automatically grab that library, and when it sends it down to the device, include that library so it's available there. And so that's how you do there. There are special directives. I mean, you can control this process very, very tightly, but that's all you have to do is go into JavaScript link files and hand it there. An example of I used out of that is that I found a really cool library that would allow it to trap key commands. So if you wanted to have a keyboard-driven desktop web interface, you could include this little library and then you could run little functions that would say, hey, if you saw this key combination, trigger this piece of JavaScript. And so that was a library that I had to include on that form and send it down to the user. And worked great. There was just zero problems with it at all.
Terrific. We just had a quick question still on JavaScript linked files. If you have multiple libraries, how do you handle that? Do you put one on each line?
Yes. In that case, what you do is you put one on each line. So you go in here, and then you just put them on. It says here, enter a list of files with one file per line. Mm-hmm. And so you go boom, boom, boom. And then it'll include all those files that are designated there into it.
Great. Here's a question. I don't know if you know it offhand, but if not, we can always take a look at it offline. And that is, how do you set up a UX component for a mobile app that you want to enable pinch and zoom?
Oh, that's a good question. I might have to come back and do a little research on that. I don't know that off the top of my head. That's a really good question. I'm not sure.
Typically, pinch zoom is shut off because those hand gestures are usually used to navigate, say, from panel to panel, but I could definitely see instances where you might want to zoom in on something.
Yeah, now, the ink control and other things like that are incorporating those kind of behaviors. So some of our controls, what we're seeing is that as we move into the mobile optimized form world, more and more of the controls are optimized for the behaviors that exist on a mobile platform.
Great. Let me see. I think that may have come to the end of the questions here, but let me just take a quick look through. So is one hiding?
Great questions. We really appreciate it.
Sure. And if I missed your question, I'm really sorry that I'm looking at it.
We'll review it and make sure we
will review it
line it up for next week.
Point. Yeah, I think that's probably about it. Wonderful. So, oops. Oh, so we have a recommendation. They'd like to see a CSS integration in a webinar. Like, how do you use CSS?
Oh, cool.
That's a great one, especially for UX.
That is. That's been asked many times. So.
Yeah. And another request for more chart stuff. I'm just wondering if maybe in a future demo you'd be willing to show off AM charts and maybe even Fusion charts as well.
Sure, I could line that up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's see if there's anything else.
We are here to please.
We are. By all means, send your
No is not in our vocabulary.
Send your questions.
Well, it is, but, we just limit the use of it to a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Send your questions, by the way, to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com.
And go today. If you haven't signed up for the DevCon, go sign up for it. I know there's money involved getting there and stuff, but I'll tell you, you go there, you participate, you engage, you're going to come away not only with new knowledge, but new connections and new capabilities that you never thought possible. I swear, every time I go every year, I end up producing more business because of just the interactions with people and the relationships I build. And, I have now a broader set of people when I get stuck on stuff I can tap into to try, my brain trust. So it's really a great event. Alpha is just really putting a lot of effort and money into making it great, and you're just going to have a great time.
There was actually one last question, and I think we'll get to it in 90 seconds, but it could be the basis of another webinar, and that has to do with dashboards. So you've shown a whole bunch of Google charts. Charts are used in dashboards all the time. Is there a way that you can, or what's the way that you would create an interface so that the user could choose which charts they'd like to see in their own personal dashboard?
That's a great one. Actually, I'm just showing you an example I showed last week. This is an example dashboard here, using a number of different kind of concepts. These little panels, a bar chart. Then then this looks a little familiar, I'm sure. These little donut chart pie kind of thing scenario. Yeah, I can. I've been noodling on that myself, and I think I can come up with some ideas, and that would be kind of a dedicated webinar, just to kind of show real quick, dirty, how you would maybe approach doing that. It is very powerful, because you want to be able to have the user to kind of tune it to their needs. So instead of having to write a new dashboard for every person, you can say, hey, here are your widgets. Pick which widgets you want on your dashboard, and it will show those particular widgets. You can say, hey, what content do I want to show here? So yeah, we could put some, it may take a little bit, but we could put something like that together for our wonderful community in the outside world.
That'd be great. So we've come to the end of our time. Dan, thank you for presenting. I'd like to thank everyone who attended today, everyone who asked questions, and by all means, please keep those questions coming to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. So we hope you have a wonderful day. We hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care and goodbye.